We'll just, well, maybe we can make it.
We'll see how we do.
You can take breaks.
Yeah, like I said, that might be the way to do it.
From as far back as I can remember, I just was fascinated by space, and anything pertaining to space or space travel or space program just fascinated me. And as I grew older, I started drawing, and that worked its way into my drawings, you know. And I drew other things too, cars and houses and technological type things. I started drawing when I was probably 3 years old. I've still got a few that even goes back nearly that far. The first inspiration that I can remember in a big way was when I was a little boy. I would see the works of Chesley Bonestell in encyclopedias or magazines or books, whatever, and I could just sit and look at those for 30 to 45 minutes at a time, just looking at every little detail, you know, and dreaming of the day that I could do something like that, you know. I didn't start painting until I was like in college, but the drawing persisted all through school, you know, high school, elementary school, and high school. I went to college from the fall of '69 to spring of '75, 6 years. At that time, it was mostly just what the teachers sort of expected from you, you know, landscapes or still lifes or that sort of thing, you know. So when I started painting space pictures, you know, they were kind of, they didn't know what to think about it, I guess you'd say. I also done a lot of just, you know, traditional landscapes too, but they both kind of went along together. I'm basically a landscape artist is what I am, except I just paint some here on Earth and some out in space, I guess you could say. During that time, I was just very prolific and motivated and inspired. I was a very inspired person by nature and the, you know, just the oceans, the mountains, the seas, the streams, and all that kind of you know, all that kind of stuff. Then after I got, the space stuff was kind of working in there along beside it, but after I got out of college, I didn't have a whole lot to do for a year or two, so I painted just continually. And that's when I painted a lot of space paintings. And then it became my dream to be a book cover artist. Took a lot of my space art and fantasy and science fiction type art and photographed it. Sent out several portfolios mostly to New York City publishers, you know, like all the paperback publishers mostly. Most of them went unanswered, you know. So that's why I guess I was driven to paint so much, is trying to break into the art field, you know. But when it just never took off in a big way, I, you know, fizzled out with it. I've never met many space artists because when I was young, I went to a few conventions and stuff, but that was like 30 years ago or more, you know. And after that, I'd quit kind of, I became inactive pretty much in it. It's just too hard to make a living with. Just, you know, too unpredictable. I had to do various different kinds of jobs through the years, so I didn't, when I was doing a lot of that, I didn't have a lot of time to paint, but I would paint like on weekends and stuff.
What were some of the jobs that you were doing?
I have worked in markets and stores, and I worked for over 20 years at a senior citizen center here in Parsons, and just things local, you know, and because there's not too much of an art market in Parsons, you know.
Did you ever think about leaving the area to go pursue it somewhere else?
That was my problem. I didn't want to leave home, you know, and this house is where I was born and raised. It's the only place I've ever lived. I did live in Memphis for 3 years while I went to school there, but I was just always ready to come back home, you know, after I got out of school. And I didn't want to move off to a strange place that I didn't know anything about.
That's interesting because you paint a lot of strange places.
Yeah.
Right? So that there's a little bit.
Yeah, that's
that.
true. But yeah, I paint a lot of strange spacescapes and stuff, but I was just a homebody. Before I paint a picture, I always do just a real quick rough sketch. Something takes maybe an hour or so, you know, like just on a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. I sketch the rough idea out, and then I get my canvas board and draw that drawing off. And usually from the drawing to the finished painting, some things will change because as I'm painting, I can think of things that I either want to leave out or add to it. I draw the thing off on the canvas board, the rough sketch, I draw it off on the canvas board. I start at the top and come to the bottom. And it's just like a process. Once I start, it's like a procedure. The only thing that I've painted with since I was in college is acrylics. Now, when I was young, yeah, I had to experiment with things and go back and redo. But now I've done so many of them that it's like just a process, you know. And when I draw that, my signature in at the bottom corner, I consider it done, you know. Well, this goes back to the 70s. That's it on a book cover right there. 1974. During my college years, I was heavily influenced by Paul Lear. I liked his art. It's kind of a Paul Lear type painting. This was like in my early, well, this one goes back to 72, so that's when I first started painting.
Do you remember painting that painting?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, do you remember like where exactly you were and what you were doing?
Right here's where I painted nearly all of them.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So right here.
Mm-hmm. There's a few I painted when I was in college, but the bulk of them, my art was painted right here. This used to be my mother's sewing room. She had a sewing machine here. She sewed and made crafts and that kind of stuff. After I got into art, she moved down that way where that room down there, and I took this over for an art room. My ideas, I guess, originate from, I've read so many books in my life. Started out with comic books when I was real young, and then science fiction when I got a little older. Ever since I was a little boy, I've always looked for answers to things, you know, the mysteries of the universe. I guess that's a lot of my ideas for painting spirals out of that, you know. I've always wondered what was out there in space. It just comes out of that, a lot of it, and a lot of it, like I say, a lot of the books I've read, movies I've seen, like nonfiction books I've read. I've read a lot of books on quantum physics, and I've read a lot on UFOs and paranormal. That's always been fascinating to me too. As I read something like that, sometimes I can just see what they're telling in a form of a vision, just a visionary. Sometimes I would go back and do a little touch up or something, but usually by that time I'm tired of working on that painting and I just don't fool with it anymore. So yeah, there's been a few that I've gone back and touched little things up or maybe added a little something to that I left out but like I say, usually by that time I'm tired of them and ready to go to a new one, start something new. I had some paintings that I started back in the early 80s. I had about, say 5 or 6 paintings that I started and had about half finished and then stopped. That's when I had to stop and go and work somewhere. And then after Martin and I started, him posting them on his website and everything, I went back and finished those 6 paintings after like 25, 30 years or more. And I think it's 2013, my sister, Kay, was just looking on the internet for stuff, and I think she typed my name in just to see if anything came up, and up popped a painting I did that was in Future Life magazine. He had found it in the Future Life magazine. Kay contacted him, She told him, that I had a lot of paintings and everything, and he was interested in posting them, so it got started, and for about 3 years, he was posting paintings that I'd done like back in the 70s and 80s. Well, in this time I was still working and I didn't have time to paint a whole lot. But in 2016, I retired from my job and then I started painting prolifically again. Those 3 years between 2013 and 2016, he was posting mostly older stuff. And now he's posting most of the stuff I've done in the last, say, 4 years. And in the last 4 years, I've done like over 200. It's just my vision and idea of the future. I guess you could say it's the future that I wish. When I paint like a positive image of the future, that's the way I wished it could be, The pretty landscape with maybe the weird technology going on in it or something like that. That's what I would like for the future to be, or a futuristic city in it, That's what I would like for it to be. I try not to do a whole lot of negative paintings, although I've done a few, like where maybe an asteroid's hitting a planet or something like that. But I do a lot of optimistic kind of things too. When I was going to college at Jackson State, computers were just coming in, the very primitive ones, very basic ones. You know, that was in '69 and '70. And I just never did take a computer course or anything back then. And as time went on, the computers, of course, just kept getting more and more complex. And by the time, you know, at that time, back in the 70s and 80s, I didn't really need a computer, so I never did learn to use them. And then by the time that I might could have started using one, they'd already gotten too complicated for me. And it would have distracted, I'd have been distracted by it, I guess, you know, and I just wanted to do things besides get into that too much, you know. Since I was young, out of school and everything, that was my main motivation in painting, was to paint for other people to see. Because if you paint and nobody sees it, I mean, what's the point in painting, you know? If you're just gonna paint them and store them back in a closet, I mean, what's the purpose of it?